So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged, and to what I intend to be the first battle that I do on the Cold Fix. Now, I know initially I said it was going to be Minas Morgul, but for reasons that will become abundantly clear when I do show that battle, I didn't want that one to be the one that I opened up with for a few reasons. Not because it was a bad battle by any means, but there are just a couple of things that I would rather show this one for, I think. And part of the reason is because this is going to be one of Horton's scenarios, which we haven't seen in quite a while. And to be fair, I think on the previous patch, it's probably a good thing we didn't see Horton's scenarios, because the blood splatter on the ranges that they would deliver would cause the game to crash every single time we would see one. So hopefully this time that isn't going to be the case, especially considering how long this battle actually is at 64,000 frames, although I would imagine a big chunk of that is going to be the initial manoeuvring around with the armies outside of this little mountain range here. And this one, I believe, is called the Baromir Canyon. So it's going to be quite an interesting one, this, because this is very much a mountain range. I mean, there's a lot of ground to cover, there's a lot of different choke points, there's a lot of defensive positions the defenders could take up. Having said that, for the most part, I imagine what this is going to be is a long slog for the orcs through the hills as the black Numenorians try to slow them down. So of course it's going to be orcs against Numenorians here. Umbar and Numenor are going to be on the defense, and all of the orcish factions are going to be on the attack. It's going to be quite interesting to see how all of these factions play off against one another. Of course, both Numenor and Umbar very much at home when they've got a lot of money to play with, although this is a scenario. The same sort of thing will of course be in effect here, where very much quality armies for the defenders. The attackers will of course have much more in terms of numbers, 5v3, all of that sort of thing. But you know, there is a lot of ground to cover here. There's a lot of ways into this little mountain range. There are areas within it that are open, like this one with the encampment. There are, however, a lot of trees as well that the defenders could use their advantage to hide their armies. We will start off, however, over here with Mordor and the attacking armies. So Inarius is going to be playing as one of the Mordor armies here. Olag High, obviously, you know, the big shock troops of Mordor, lots of morale on infantry. So, you know, these these attacking armies, you'd imagine going to be mostly just sort of standard units like the Moranon here. There's also some orc fodder back there, but there are also some decent units back here, like the Uruk captains, who are of course the the renamed version of the Bulldogs from the previous patch. Very, very fine General's Bodyguard unit indeed. Moranon units here, Temple Executions and Temple Guard. There's some Dunaim Shadowbow, so attacking rangers here also, Troll Drummers to keep all of the lower ranks in line, Moranon Archers, Sauron's Will for a bit of AP, Orc Maulers for a bit of lower tier AP, but nonetheless they are actually pretty decent. You can see actually they've got their armour on as well, so they'll be a little bit more effective there. And then of course we have the Blackguard of Barad-dûr, who really contrast off against the ground now with how blackened their armour is, but on the attack they can be an invaluable asset for Mordor, of course. And the Minas Morgul chosen as well, similar blackened armour, very nice heavy spears. So yeah, that's the first Mordor army. More quality than I was actually expecting from the offset there, or from the outset. We have Engsvitz, who's going to be playing as Angmar. Trolls of Gundabad are here. We can see that there are some Witch-Round Pikemen, more Witch-Round Pikemen, some Trolls of Angmar over on that side, and some Guardians of Kharndoom. The rest of his army is hidden, which suggests there's probably a healthy amount of the lower end units of Angmar here. Still, I mean, with all the defensive positions and with the fact that rangers do still exist, you could argue that the attackers do need a bit more in terms of quality to be competitive in this kind of scenario now. FFA Muffins is playing as the Misty Mountains, obviously very much at home when it comes to bringing a high numbers army. Goblin King's Bodyguard, we've got some Cave Troll Drummers, there's a lot of hidden units over here as well by the looks of things. White Uruk Fearmongers, Heavy Goblin Halberdiers, and there's also some Trolls that we can see as well. Death Eater is also playing as the Orcs of the Misty Mountains, so once again we can see the Goblin King's Bodyguard with their new heightened numbers. He's gone for some he's been given some Mountain Uruk Coast. The Heavy Goblin Infantry as well, which of course in the hotfix have been made even cheaper, so they're now a little bit more viable, and if you want to bring them for numbers, you could argue their case against the Mountain Uruk Coast, whereas in the previous patch you really couldn't. It was the Uruk Coast every time. Heavy Goblin Infantry and more Goblin Infantry. Archers as well, and then we get into the final bits of his army, so Heavy Goblin Spears, Halberdiers, Halberds, Heavy Goblin Infantry as well. And then finally we have another Angmar army played by new player 195, been quite a while since I've seen that name. So we've got some Marauders, we've got some Halberds, and we've got some Guardians of Kharndoom as well, but of course large sections of these armies are hidden. So we'll obviously see them as the battle goes along. Once again, it's going to be quite a short little look at the attack, or the defending armies I should say as well, because we can only see a certain amount of them. So WK is playing as an Umbar army here. We can see the Balaketh marksman with the armour upgrade, of course. Going to be very important to have all this quality for the defenders if they're going to withstand this Orcish onslaught. Balaketh marksmen are over here as well. More of his army down here. The shield bearers, which should be a little bit better in this patch. They were a little bit underwhelming in the previous ones. They have been given a little bit of a buff. Adunheim shield guard and Naru sentinels in there as well. Just in behind, Alcaron Legion, of course, still the same sort of units they always were. Very, very fine unit of line infantry indeed. Corsair Blackguards, I think with the removal, or largely the removal of the Prec trait, the Corsair Blackguards might be regular javelins in the same way that the Seafarers of Nindamos are now, which gives them another potential option. We have the Balaketh Axe Guard, who have been given a much more reasonable battle axe now. It's still very large, of course, in comparison to the axes you would see in real life. But this is a lot more. This is much more like it. Previously, it kind of looked like a malformed seashell, their axe. Now it looks more legit. And of course, they have the armor upgrade as well. Very useful for dealing with orcs on the attack. This Balagar archers up here on this side as well. Just trying to sort of see where all of the armies are can be a little bit of a challenge, to be honest with you, with all of the hidden units. Balakith Axe Guard, Shield Bearers, Naran Iron Guard as well. Harbingers of Castamere, of course. In a situation where you've got a lot of quality, they were always going to be here. Balagar Pikes and Balaketh Marksmen. Way at the back over here, we can see Horton has got some units back here with his Numenorians, the Numenorian Steel Bows, armor-piercing archers, of course. We have the Numenorian Cohort, a really strong line infantry as well, in much the same way that the Alcaron Legion are. Numenorian Shield Guard and Sentinels, so of course a lot of deployment zones all around this map. Horton's army here at the back. Pharazim Swordmasters, Numenorian Cohort and Royal Legion of Armenelos. A Trebuchet up on this cliffside over here, Belagyr Archers, Seafarers once again. Steel Bows, Sentinels and some Shield Guard in and amongst there as well. And there is another army up here played by Chris Almighty, who's actually Gondor. So yeah, it is the Numenorians on the defence, but Gondor, not black Numenorians. So he's got some Fountain Guard, he's got some Nothian Honour Guard in there as well, but that's pretty much the only part of his army we can see, because the rest of it, I would imagine, is hidden in the pockets of trees that are interspersed throughout this valley. But yeah, I will make a cut here, of course, because it's going to take a little while, I think, for the attackers to get into a position where they can actually, you know, start laying siege to the defenders' initial lines. But yeah, I'll make a cut and we'll rejoin when the battle is beginning. So it begins, and Umbar, of course, are going to be leading the defence from the front. The Balaketh marksmen up here on the side are going to be raining some arrows down upon the first advancing orc parties, led by cave trolls, interestingly enough, from Death Eater. So sort of the cave trolls are a good choice to have around, because it does of course mean that the defenders will have to really pack their front line unless they want the cave trolls to just run right through it. And then of course, sorry about this, I'm losing my voice already. It's not Corona, I swear. We've got the Snaga Stalkers moving forward as well, so this is unsurprising. A large portion of the attacking armies were hidden, so this is the kind of unit that you can expect to see in the first waves. Goblin Archers are here also, which of course, considering the fact that they do need to put on a defence here, this is going to be quite interesting. I mean, the Shield Bearers are pretty good on the front line against these sorts of armoured units. Of course, their armour piercing is not quite as dramatic as the likes of Heavy Axemen, but the added defensibility of those shields is going to be important here as these low tier archers attempt to make some sort of impact onto these front lines. There's also some Numenorian Cohort here from Heath Horton. It is going to be interesting, this. Harbingers of Castamere, because one of the things that I do always watch out for is the fact that, you know, are the defences layered? And if they are layered, have they committed enough to each layer to make it worthwhile? And it will be interesting to see if that is the case here. I mean, under normal circumstances, 4 units, 2 shield bearers, 1 cohort, 1 pike unit. That is pretty good. It covers for one another's weaknesses quite well, but are there enough units here to withstand a full-blooded assault from all of these attacking armies? I mean, it depends how much the attackers want to move forward. If they want to commit everything all at once, then no, this won't be enough. But if they don't, then this could be a very effective front line indeed. You can see the troll drummers coming forwards. This will of course mean that these low tier units stick around in melee for a little bit longer, but they will still rout ultimately under the pressure from these more elite units if they're not careful. To be fair as well, these shield bearers won't actually be all that useful, or at least their AP won't be all that useful against the Snaga. Of course they will still win. Forward come the Warlords of Umbar, so the Black Numenorian cavalry rushing forward now, and the cave trolls are nearby. They could be used to support to good effect, but again, they're quite fortunate really that the Snaga were spread out enough to the fact that that wasn't an absolutely devastating charge, but again, it keeps the attackers on their toes, that sort of thing. Goblin infantry moving forward with the Snaga. The trolls are here to act as some kind of defence, but if the trolls get too far in front, they'll be the ones to take the charge, and they will die. So in many ways it's kind of a symbiotic relationship here between the fodder and the trolls. Not that this fodder actually has much chance of breaking through these lines all on their lonesome anyway. They will need a little bit more in terms of quality if they want to make any sort of impact at all. Once again, the low tier units trying to charge in here, trying to make something happen, but once again the Warlords of Umbar taking the opportunity to take a little bite out of them. And again, none of the cavalrymen end up falling. Not crippling damage to this fodder just yet, but you can tell they're already shaken, even with the trolls nearby. So as soon as they engage in melee with this Umbar Numenor front line, they're probably not going to last for very long. Nice cycle charging in and out. Of course, the charge is quite difficult when you have to go through a thick line of your own men. You kind of lose momentum when you do that, but still decent casualties here. The shield bearer is actually retreating back. I like this from WK because it's a sign that he sees the fact that the AP isn't going to be all that useful. So he's going to allow the pikes and the Numenorian cohort to pick up the slack, and fire arrows coming in from behind to try and break this fodder as quickly as possible. Very good. I do like that. It shows good awareness of your unit's strengths, and while the Balakith shield bearers would of course win very easily against these kinds of units, he wants to save the AP, keep them healthy for units that their maces will be a little bit more useful against. And of course, considering this is just fodder, the pikes and one unit of Numenorian cohort is going to be just fine against this sort of thing. And of course you can see a big rout here initially from the attackers. So far so good for the defenders, you have to say. While over here, the attackers are getting into a position, and I have to say, Inarius and Engswitz's army looked the more scary based on the units that we could see. Inarius especially has got a fair amount of Mordor's decent tools at its disposal. Lots of bodyguard units, higher end units like the Minas Morgul chosen as well. So Gondor will probably have more of a task on their hands. Having said that, this is a very brutal choke point to have to try and march through. I think it's a case of just having to pour through as quickly as possible, I think, for Mordor and Angmar, and trying to smash this line out the way, because the longer you get caught in a situation like that, the more likely it is that the Athelian Rangers will pop in on this little hill here and start ruining your day. And I don't think, there's no way through over here. It looked like there might be, but there isn't. So it's going to be, again, it's going to be punishing. Like, as soon as the attackers manage to get into the mountain range, it becomes a little bit more complicated for the defenders, I think. But initially, on the outer reaches of the defence, may be where the defenders can actually bleed the attackers the most, looking at the lay of the land here. Belagaya pikemen holding on very firmly here. Warlords of Umbar taking a few hits from the goblin archers, but very, very heavily armoured and shielded from the front, of course, as most knights of this calibre are. So it'll take quite a while before very basic goblin archers actually have the impact I'm sure he wants them to. But even so, I mean, WK should probably move these warlords. You don't want to lose the odd knight to goblin archers after all. Because as you see here, Balakith shield bearers, are they on the front line? I mean, a couple of them are, but it's mostly still Balagaya pikes. And now, seeing that the shield bearers may be a little bit further away from the action, the cave trolls do decide to come in, but as soon as they do, of course, the Balakith shield bearers close up, and they're going to try and focus down the trolls with their AP damage. Cave trolls, of course, not the most heavily armoured trolls, but the added damage and just the added solidity in melee alongside the pikes that the shield bearers offer are going to be very important. And of course, if nothing else, it'll make the task of the Snaga and other fodder on this front line even harder than it already is. Unfortunate for them, to say the least. Harbingers of Casimir are here, Warlords of Umbar in the background as well. Ooh, there's fences there. Ooh. I was about to say that Horton is one of those map makers who doesn't tend to use buildings and, by extension, fences to funnel people into choke points as much. He uses the map more to do that, which lends itself to much higher stability and a much lower likelihood of crashing. Let's hope that remains the case. There's actually fighting going on back here. One of the Balakith shield bearers has somehow found himself all the way over here after chasing the trolls, and he's getting involved here with a few goblin infantrymen. Interesting to see how this brave soul fares. Of course, he will eventually fall, especially if the trolls decide to come and focus him down. But yeah, clearly this is going to be a wave-based assault, and I mean, I would assume there are rules in place as well, so this has to be the case. Because otherwise, sending forward your fodder alone, I've said time and time again, is never a great idea, because you're not really going to make any sort of ground. I mean, you can see that there is the odd Umbar corpse on the ground from a couple of shield bearers, a couple of pikes as well, but it is a very one-sided engagement, this. And yeah, the pikes You know, they are in a very thin line, so you could try and push through with fodder, but I mean, even if you do, the shield bearers can just close up. And the shield bearers have taken a few losses, that unit in particular, but then again, they did try and push through the fodder to get at the trolls, so that would explain that. Fire arrows coming in. Again, WK is rationing his resources on this front line very, very effectively to deal with the fodder. Only the odd volley of fire arrows is coming in when it looks like the morale is falling apart, and then he saves the rest of his ammunition. So, very, very savvy play this. And of course, Horton hasn't had to do much with his Numenorian cohort other than keep them here in reserve. Forward come the trolls. I think what WK was trying to do there was charge in with the warlords, which is the right idea, but his own men are kind of in the way, so that made that task a little bit more tricky. But now, I mean, you can chase this this big army away, because you look at all of the numbers that are coming forward now. Again, most of it is lower tier units, but as soon as the attackers are able to start filtering in some quality, that's when the situation gets a little bit more dicey. The warlords actually weren't able to get a charge off on the cave trolls there, so the cave trolls will take this fight. The odd Umbar knight will probably fall as a result of charging in there. I think they actually did manage to slip away just in time. One of them died, maybe a couple. But the cave trolls want to get away from there, because the last thing they want is to get lanced by the knights. Because the trolls will be as soon as this front line starts to falter a little bit, the cave trolls will be the ideal tool to push it over the edge. But here comes the next wave of Death Eater sending forward a ton of goblin infantry. Having a closer look at them, you can actually see they do have the armour upgrade, so I mean they're not going to be quite as poor as they normally are in melee, but still, when they're up against Numenorian infantry, they're still not going to be ideal by any stretch of the imagination. Armour is maybe being a bit generous to what the goblin infantry are wearing at the moment, but there it is. You can see the initial fight. I mean, you can see just the carpet of bodies. I mean, something like the Balagar pikes are so good in this situation, because normally pikemen, they do their damage relatively slowly, but against fodder, even pikes are going to be able to rack up a very nice kill count pretty quickly. These Balagar pikes also have the armour upgrades. They're going to be a little bit more resilient to any sort of range damage the attackers try to inflict on them, even without the shielded infantry that are nearby. And here they come. They actually do manage to bypass the pikes a little bit there with the charge. Get in and amongst them a little bit, which is going to cause the Balakith shield bearers to be activated and come forward once again. Going to use those maces on the goblin. You can see how quickly they start to rout, however. Very, very low morale indeed, and part of this is due to the fact the cave troll drummers are now so far away, and I think actually WK is trying to shoot them. So he knows how best to try. Yeah, I think he is. He's trying to shoot the cave troll drummers, trying to kill them. It will take quite a while for a unit of archers like the Balakith marksmen, who are a little bit more defensively orientated, to kill off trolls like that. But I mean, as soon as the trolls are gone, I mean, they're already too far away from the front line to actually back up their men properly. Angmar marauders coming forward, heavy goblin crossbows are coming forward, so this is going to be a little bit more like it. Goblin band coming forward from Angmar as well. Harbingers of Castamere are going to be committed to the front line, however, so I mean, while there are some units that are a little bit more impressive, still not ideal. Mountaineeric archers, that's interesting. So they're still in the files. I'd be interested to see actually how the Mountaineeric archers are actually balanced, because they were from a previous version of the game, I'm pretty sure. I don't think they were added back into the Misty Mountains regular roster. They may have been, but I doubt it. So it'd be interesting to see how old balancing interacts with the new. Fire arrows coming in once again. And there's a lot of wavering going on already. You can see they're actually trying to push through the section of line which is thinnest, which is wise. Sending over the Goblin Band. Slightly higher mass on those spears. You can actually see the Warlords of Umbar now dropping like flies, and part of that must be because of the heavy Goblin Crossbowman. And WK just sort of standing there and taking it. I think he's trying to sort of maintain his front line a little bit more so than anything else at the moment. Much more like it from the attackers though. Of course, they're still going to be bled pretty heavily here. It's going to be entirely down to their supporting units as to whether they get through here or not, their archers and their crossbows. Because with regards to melee, they're still thoroughly outclassed in terms of quality. Numenorian cohort moving forward with the shield bearers and the pikes now to help mop up this second wave of the assault. Goblin infantry, defeat almost a certainty. Harbingers of Castamere, the forces of Bouncer forces is evenly matched. The forces of Balance is evenly matched, I was about to say, which is certainly not correct. More Snargers in here, and of course over on this side the Harbingers of Castamere, which are going to be utterly dominant against most of these units. Angmar Marauders, who by comparison are actually a decent quality unit they're sending in, because it's mostly been the lowest of the low that the attacks have sent in thus far. The Angmar Marauders are a unit of dedicated line infantry, albeit lower tier. Warlords of Umbar, what are they going to try and do? They've been taking losses. Harbingers of Castamere may be thinking about pulling back at this point, seeing that this front line is probably going to fall sooner rather than later. In comes another unit of Goblin Band, albeit there's a lot of routing going on here from the attackers. Again, it just comes down to the quality of units that are at hand. There's a lot of routing again. Goblin Band. This is the problem with having to send forward only your lowest quality units first. Like, there are some units that have already routed that are going to come back for a second attempt, but yeah. Yeah, Harbingers of Castamere moving back behind the cliff. Warlords of Umbar going to do the same. What are the heavy Goblin crossbows going to do? More routing, so you can see, even though this front line has been put under the greatest amount of pressure, if the attackers have had their hands tied by having to send forward their lowest tier units first, I mean, this goes to show the quality discrepancy between units like this. Like, it's never going to yield any results for attackers to have this kind of mindset going in. I mean, now though, the defenders have kind of broken ranks a little bit, but the attackers are in no position to actually take any sort of advantage of that. So, it doesn't really come to anything in the end. Goblin infantry coming back in, but that gap is going to be closed up by the newly reformed Numenorian cohort, who are going to be able to get back into formation. And needless to say, easy work for the Numenorian cohort against this sort of thing, even more so than stuff like the shield bearers, because of course they've got huge attack scores. Infantry wielding swords with their higher base attack as well against lightly armoured troops like this. They're going to carve through them like a chainsaw through jelly. Warlords of Umbar coming forward again. Now that the attack is being broken up, the cavalry can come in, try and get a few cheeky charges off. Cave Troll Drummers are here. I mean, they're going to close up. I mean, they're not going to get charged at the very least, but they're not that impressive in melee either. A lot of those Warlords of Umbar actually did fall in that instance, and I think that must be, yeah, the crossbows are coming in with their bolts, so WK trying to use his cavalry to good effect, but ultimately with the crossbows on hand it's going to be more difficult to do that. But again, the infantry has been so dominant in this fight that I don't think they need to worry about that. The Cave Trolls could come in now. I mean, the line is thin enough. As long as they have some infantry to sort of follow through on it, they should be fine. But again, just 2 units of Goblin Band is not going to be enough. They are trying to do the right thing here, the attackers, to be fair, but they have had their hands tied by the rules somewhat here. Which, considering the buffs to the defenders since Horton was last involved in scenario making, I don't think is entirely necessary. With tools like Rangers and really high damage Javelins that the defenders can have at their disposal now, I don't think you need to hamstring the attackers in this way. But we'll see. I mean, we'll see how this battle goes. The attackers could still very well go on to win this, because it's possible the defenders also have their hands tied by similar rules, like they have to layer up like this, in which case it kind of balances itself out, especially seeing as this assault has now yielded results, to be fair. Very quick rout there from the Belagire pikes that were at the heart of that defence, and now the Numenorian cohort are running for the hills. I feel as though as well you can see the shield bearers, their lower melee defence was really quite apparent there. Their AP focus actually worked against them a little bit. Yes, they will have racked up one hell of a kill count when we look at the end, but they were still ultimately taking losses against these low tier units because, again, their AP focus not really coming into effect, and the fact that AP units tend to have lower melee defense makes it easier for units like the Goblin Infantry to actually hit. Nice charge there from the depleted Knights though, routing off that depleted unit of Goblin Infantry, still contributing to their team's efforts. And the first defence has fallen here. WK is sort of making a nuisance of himself with his warlords still. What have we got going on over here? The first wave coming in, Inarius, and he is going to lead the way with the Black Guard of Barad-dûr. So, Chris Almighty, how will he deal with this assault? I mean, he is going to need to be careful. If the Black Guard do lead the way, as good as the Fountain Guard are, their formation will be broken by the Black Guard, and then Mordor could pour in. He's going to need to be extremely careful. I'm sure he's got Athenian Rangers around here somewhere, though. He'd be mad not to. I mean, put them here, shoot right down the canyon. Absolute devastation. All Wardens of Minas Ithil, of course. Forward come Mordor. We'll keep an eye on that, but for the time being, there's still the small matter of Umbar and WK's cavalry trying to move in. He's going to try and go after the Troll Drummers, I think. He was, but I think actually a couple of these stragglers of the Goblin Band got in the way of the charge fully connecting with the Cave Troll Drummers. Forward comes another unit of Goblin Band, and of course they are spearmen. It'll take them quite a while still to crack through the armour of the Warlords, but they are going to manage it now, and that is going to rout the Warlords of Umbar. So some good disruption there from WK, but ultimately the Warlords do finally fall, and finally some genuine progress for the attackers. Now we will have a look back over here. Nimlothi and Honor Guard revealing themselves. Let's see here. Doesn't look like it. I mean, there are Marksmen of Kaer-Andros, and they are damaging archers, but I don't know how long this Gondorian front line is going to hold. I mean, yes, they're an Nimlothi and Honor Guard, but they got a little bit further ahead of the rest of the army. That's not great for them. Fully upgraded Gondor infantry alongside the Fountain Guard, but yeah, this is what I was worried about. This is what I was very worried about. This Gondorian front line didn't look strong enough. I mean, the Citadel Guard are here in reserve as well. They're going to try and patch things up, but as soon as the Black Guard get the wind in their sails, and then more reinforcements coming down the valley as well with the Morannon infantry, Inarius smells blood in the water, and rightly so. I mean, these are strong Gondorian units on the front line, and a large portion of the attackers are made up of stuff like fodder and marauders. But with that gap, the biggest tool the defenders have at their disposal in this sort of thing is organisation and quality. If you can take away the first of those things, the quality can't really be as effective as you would want it to be. Fully upgraded Axemen of Lasarnac coming in. I mean, the Black Guard are going to get butchered on the way through here because they're going up against stuff like Citadel Guard and Axemen of Lasarnac, units with huge AP values. But they can do more damage than I'm sure Gondor would have wanted them to here. Morannon infantry pouring in. Black Guard of Barad-dûr shaken, but they are going to get some reinforcements in the shape of the Morannons. Angmar Marauders getting through. I mean, they could disrupt the Marksmen of Kaer-Andros for a little while. On the front line, however, it is going to be tough. I mean, from the front, they are still having to deal with Fountain Guard and Nimlothi and Honor Guard. Brutal units. There are Gundabad Guard on the front line as well, so more quality units being committed over here, and you are seeing already that the attacks are having a better time of it as a result. Black Guard of Barad-dûr here. Minas Morgul chosen moving forward. Yeah, and of course these Angmar Marauders won't last too long in melee. Marksmen of Kaer-Andros very effective in melee, of course, but preventing them from firing for just a little while will allow the infantry a little bit more breathing room, which they will need, because of course they are going up against some really high-end Gondorian infantry here. Heavily armoured as well, so not going to go down easy. You can see there some of the stolen Dwarven shields from the Gundabad Guard filtering their way through as well. And this is never what you want to see. A buckled front line if you're the defender. Going to be tough for them. We'll keep an eye on that. Over on the other side of things, meanwhile, still outer skirmishes happening. Alcarondas Legion and Harbingers of Castamere and the Dunaim Shield Guard actually away from the front line a little bit. WK maybe trying to set up a position where he can use his archers up on the hill. There is Balakith Marksman, his Belagair archers. He can set up a really nasty crossfire. Having said that, I don't think this outer infantry is really achieving all that much. He's trying to sort of organise himself now, but all of these low tier units potentially going to be able to get a little bit more value for themselves than they were initially thinking they would, I think. Goblin infantry either taking a charge from the Alcarondas Legion. I mean, once again, it's a case over here of there's a lot of lower quality units. Over on the other attack, we saw the attackers committing forward stuff of a little bit higher quality right from the outset, whereas over here, still the best infantry they have on the front line really is stuff like Angmar Marauders and heavy Goblin infantry, which of course are going to get absolutely destroyed by stuff like Alcarondas Legion. But it is a numbers game, and we'll see how long Umbar is able to keep this up for against the massive horde that is approaching them. And more Angmar Marauders coming forward, heavy Goblin infantry, so at the very least it's not outright fodder that they're having sent forward at this point, the attackers. And in terms of quality, it's still going to be tough for them. Wards of Minas Ithil, a Gondorian archer unit, which is interesting. You can see there the blackened projectiles they have. Poison arrows? It was poison arrows or armour piercing that the Wards of Minas Ithil were given. They're not body piercing anymore, I don't think. They've been tried to sort of set apart, because as it was, they weren't really all that effective as a unit in comparison to regular rangers. Over here, meanwhile, Blackwatch Legion pushing through as well, so now they really mean business over here, the attackers, and the discrepancy is pretty wild, to be honest with you. Blackwatch Legion and Blackguard of Barad-dûr doing their thing. Time and time again, actually, we've seen those mass pushes fail in recent times, so it's actually quite rare to see them succeed so roundly. Of course, the Marksmen of Kaer-Andros were able to kill the Angmar Marauders, but now they're going to have to deal with Trolls of Gundabad. Much different proposition, of course. Over on the front line, you can still see Gondor infantry now broken and fighting to the death. I mean, a lot of damage will have been done to the attackers, both through archers and through the elite infantry of Gondor, stuff like the Fountain Guard, of course. But, and it is a big but, their front line is collapsing. Uruk captains moving forward, Troll drummers now shoring everything up to make sure that these ranks don't break. Witchrealm Scourge Raiders moving forward. Numenorian cohort did come forward. So Numenor, I did notice this reinforcing unit just arrived, but came a little bit too late, to be honest with you, and a single unit of Numenorian cohort isn't going to be enough to turn this around. So good news for the attackers, to be honest with you, because they're taking a lot of losses over on the other side. The ratio is not favourable to them over on the eastern side of this mountain range, but here from the north, the attackers having a much better time of it. So finely balanced so far, you would have to say. Witchrealm Scourge Raiders, which now I think are less of a prec unit and are a little bit more of a standard axe throwing unit. They're taunting. The sickening black speech chants. Yeah, Numenorian cohort routing and broken. So yeah, good assault that from the attackers. Much more what you would expect when you're not sort of bound by rules to adhere to certain things based on the scenario. But, you know, that's fair enough. I mean, the defenders are bound by that as well, because clearly they haven't parked rangers on each choke point waiting for the attackers to filter through. So, I mean, it's all fair, I suppose. But still, Blackwatch Legion and Blackguard of Barad-dûr are very good. The Blackguard of Barad-dûr actually are mostly killed to a man at this point. Blackwatch Legion, though, still got enough in them for another push, I would say. These marksmen need to run more quickly than they're currently managing. Over here, meanwhile, you can see that sort of contrasting fortunes, really, for the attackers and defenders on both sides. Because over here, the defenders are actually pushing back the attackers. Fire arrows coming in again. Balakith Axe Guard moving forward. They've taken a lot of losses, and part of that can be explained by the heavy goblin crossbows, but the AP that they offer is going to be brutal against all of these heavy goblins, because what little survivability they have comes from their armour. So stuff like heavy axemen is like kryptonite to them. And there's still the Harbingers of Castamere on the front line. I mean, Harbingers of Castamere are going to be so dominant against this kind of unit, because it's going to be so rare that they lose a unit model against stuff like Goblin Band and heavy goblin infantry. Especially when they're backed up by those arrows coming in from the Wardens of Minas Ithil. The solidity of the Adunheim Shield Guard alongside them with their really heavy armour and locked morale as well. And this can be the issue when facing off against Umbar, of course. A lot of their higher end units are locked morale, so you can't even rely on surrounding them and breaking their will to fight. You know, they will stand and fight to the bitter end and inflict as many losses as is possible, which, considering the losses the attackers have already taken from the front here, it's pretty grim. Pretty grim indeed. But it will be interesting actually to see how the attackers now decide to divide up their attention over here. Mordor and Angmar have managed to break through from the north and they're filing in, but what direction do they take? Do they go this way through the encampment? Because I do believe... Nope, there isn't. This is just a kind of pointless section of the map, I suppose, unless there are hidden units back there, in which case Gondor has got like a hidden army. They can't go that way either, so they have two choices, but these are still two very contrasting choices. Do they move this way into Horton's defence with his steel bows? There's obviously more Gondorians around here as well, alongside Horton's Numenorians now. But this is more of a direct route to the settlement, which lies nestled at the back of this mountain range. Or, come on, do they go this way? They can go over here. I mean, yes, there is a pool over here, but they can send their archers and their ranged units over here, park them over on the other side of this little lake over here, and they can start shooting into the back of the Umbar ranks. It's an interesting choice, because I mean, if they do send their ranged units to do that, it's much less likely that they'll have a good time of it trying to push through over here, because supporting ranged units can be so important. As we've seen, to be fair, over here, without the support of stuff like the crossbows, this would have been even worse for the attackers than it has already been. Mountain Uruk archers in position, trying to do their thing. Alcarondas Legion, here I think it's more of a rearguard effort. Balakith Axe Guard charging forward to try and draw the attention of the attackers once again. Another charge there into the Snaga. The poor Snaga. They've really had a hard time of it here, and again, Angmar Marauders, those wooden shields are going to get split very easily by the superior arms of the Numenorians. They're going to cycle back out here though. And now they're going to get themselves back into another choke point. Corsair Blackguards in position. Yeah, I mean, Inarius is going to do that, so he is going to send his ranged units over to here. And based on how... I mean, Umbar now have got a choice. I mean, the Orc archers are going to force Umbar to either move forwards or retreat from this situation. So will WK double down or will he pull back? I think, based on what we've seen so far, he's probably going to double down, which is fair enough. Yeah. You can see as well, Numenorian steel bows are firing. What are they firing at? I mean, they don't have a lot of ammunition. Yeah, so these black arrows are armor piercing. So that is what the Mordor Ministerial have. I mean, it's a black trail that's poison and sort of a solid black projectile for AP. I think he's going after the Blackwatch Legion, interestingly enough. Considering how effective these Great Shield infantry units were for the Orcs just now, I can see why. But they are a little bit scattered. I mean, you do need to be a little bit conservative with your steel bow ammunition because they have a very limited ammo supply. And it can be so important to use your ammo well when you're a defender like this. Pushing forwards though. Very nice. I mean, you can see they're still filtering into this canyon. Lots of losses here. But unlike on the front, it's much more even between the attackers and the defenders, which the attackers will be very pleased with. Marauders, Guardians of Khand Dûm, Orc Fellas as well. So they still have lower end units that they can more freely commit to a fight. Upgraded Guardians of Khand Dûm as well. Yeah, the quality discrepancy between the armies from the front and this army from the north is fairly clear. Engsfits and Inarius definitely have more high-end tools to be using. Whereas over here, I mean, they do still have some upper-end units. We saw the Goblin King Bodyguard previously. But it is much more about numbers from the front here. As it often is with the Misty Mountains. A Dunheim Shield Guard fighting to the bitter end. You can see this is where their locked morale comes in. Otherwise they would have already routed. Snow Trolls coming in. A ton of heavy Goblin Spears trying to do their thing as well. And now you can see they're going to try and move in. I mean, the Balakith Axe Guard left out a little bit too long there and ultimately overwhelmed. And of course the Balakith are the highest tier unit that are not locked morale in the Umbar roster, really. Balagyr Archers and Nyrun Royal Guard doing their thing now, firing into the advancing ranks. Neither of them are rangers, neither of them are really damage focused archers either, but I mean, does it really matter when you're talking about shooting huge, vast tracts of goblins as they move forward? Snow Trolls pulling back. Goblin Band and Orc Fellas moving in from the sides. There, of course, our Blackguards here as well. You can see the support from the attackers now coming in still. Mountain Oak Archers trying to shoot. Is this front line going to be enough to withstand yet another assault from the hordes of trash that seem to be attacking them from this angle? Meanwhile, Seafarers of Nindamos up here from Horn. What's he actually going after? Going after the halberdiers? He is going after the halberds. I mean, Seafarers of Nindamos, their ammunition is a little bit more important than to go after heavy goblin halberds, I think. But I mean, they are just sitting here, so I suppose it is free kills. But yeah, Seafarers are not quite as devastating as they used to be in the previous patch of the game, but even so. Meanwhile, there's an assault coming in. Orc Fodder, Witch-Armed Scourge Raiders. I mean, they're getting ready for another assault, certainly. The Witch-Armed Scourge Raiders using their throwing axes into this Numenorian front line. Numenorian cohort and guards for Skiliath making up this. They're just getting ready here, though, the attackers. Once again, they're going to come forward with a ton of strength, you would imagine, and try and break this defence as quickly as possible. Pharazim Swordmasters and Gondor Infantry. And Pharazim Swordmasters as well. 3 hit points on those guys now. The undisputed best heavy swordsman now. And that's with the Noldorin Blade Masters getting the buff they always needed to make them locked morale. So Numenor with a real gem there. We'll see how strong they are. It's one of those units where you think, will they be OP? We'll have to wait and see how the meta develops. Another unit I'm wondering about that is the 1st Legion Pikes of Khazad-dûm, which if you don't know now, they've been made much more expensive, but, you know, sort of similar to what you would pay for a bodyguard tier unit or a unit of knights even, but they are AP now, which I think makes them better than the Karas Gladhon's Guardians of Lothlorien, because yeah, having 2 hit points is all well and good for pikes, but AP on high tier pikes like that, you do pay an awful lot for them, to be fair. And they do still come with all the caveats that pikes normally have, where if you can break their formation they become much less scary, but breaking a Khazad-dûm formation is certainly easier said than done. WK is sending more reinforcements over here, interestingly enough. Corsair fencers. There's still the blackguards over here. Now getting a little bit too close for comfort there. The Mountain Uruk archers. And WK taking the opportunity, and he's going to charge him with his Balagai archers downhill. Archers don't have much of a charge bonus, of course, but going to try and take advantage of anything they can. And you can see now more quality units starting to appear on the front line, or higher quality units starting to appear on the front line for the attackers. Mountain Uruk host. The units on loan from Dol Guldur to the Misty Mountains. Very much the equivalent of something like the Uruk High Infantry. And more heavy goblins, and it's the heavy goblin spears now as well, which of course are a much more useful unit. Holding power and a bit of AP sprinkled in as well. Ooh, hello. Yeah, and this is the problem that they're going to have, I think. Again, these smaller layers, especially as the assault from the north has been more successful overall because of their higher quality. Pharazim Swordmaster here. I mean, Pharazim Swordmasters are all well and good. They're extremely powerful. Ooh, hello. Warns of Minister Thiel again, so armor-piercing arrows coming in, which is a nice tool for Gondor to have. I mean, it does make them a little bit more worthwhile, because it makes them more of a unit that you can use against single targets. They won't have the same sort of kill count as Rangers, of course, but previously, if you wanted to bring Rangers, the Athelian Rangers were better because they had more numbers, and they were able to get more arrows downrange. And the Warns of Minister Thiel weren't really worth it, but now I think this gives Gondor another tool, makes their skirmish lineup a little bit more well-rounded. Yeah, here come the trolls once again, and again, like this attack, it's not gonna, unless these armor-piercing arrows and the Pharazim Swordmasters can do the business. I mean, in come the Ravenhelms. Shock infantry has been the big winner in this patch, and these trolls have delved deeply into the enemy lines. And Ravenhelms are exactly the sort of thing you want to be seeing against trolls. High damage infantry, and they should be just fine in this situation. But the Blackwatch Legion bisecting the lines once again. The Pharazim Swordmasters are extremely powerful, but against this kind of overwhelming odds. Steel bows getting into position. It's going to have to be arrows that do the business here. Balaketh marksmen getting engaged by the trolls. Decent in melee. I think they're going to need the help of the fencers though to make quick work of the trolls. And this outer defence, I think, its days are numbered, but I do fancy Umbar's chances more than the other side. So Umbar will be able to rack up even more of an impressive kill count for themselves the longer they can hold on. But they are now starting to see a bit of a lack of support. I mean, these blackguards are trying to get into place. How many volleys do they still have left in them? They could do devastating damage, to be fair, to this Misty Mountains push. And that is a nice volley in there as well, causing the heavy goblin spears to waver. Of course, eventually this Umbar front line is going to fall, but the damage they could do could be really critical, to be honest with you, to these armies that are attacking from the front. But Balaketh marksmen are here, getting set upon by trolls from the side. I mean, this is the problem that WK is going to have. I think from the front he'll be able to hold for some time yet, but it's going to be from the rear where this army from the north is not slowing down its momentum. Warns of Minister Thiel now getting engaged in melee by Oleg High and by Angmar Marauders. They're going to be overwhelmed there. Ooh, Corsair fencers. You can see there they are an assassin type unit, so they've got their throwing projectiles, their little throwing daggers. Very good in melee as well, of course. But can they withstand the heavy-duty trolls? With the support of the Balaketh marksmen, I would say probably. But we shall see. Angmar Marauders moving forwards. Ravenhelms are broken. Yeah, this is the problem. Like, the quality is on the front line here for the defenders, but the numbers aren't. And the layers that they have set up have been too small thus far. And I do think this makes up for the losses the attacks have taken from the eastern approach, because the two armies from the north have been so good so far. Blackguard, I mean another unit of Blackguard are here, of course, with those executioner style swords almost. Steel bows going to get overwhelmed in melee. The Pharazim Swordmasters, of course, putting up a damn good fight, but that's all they're going to be able to put up. They are going to be overwhelmed just like all of the other defenders that are here. As the banging of the drums continues, perfect support. Yeah, and Inarius and Engsfitz have played this pretty much to a T, considering the situation. Fencers getting a charge from the Trolls of Angmar. Oleg High moving in. Yeah, the last of the resistance is being mopped up now, which of course means WK is going to have to consider how to best hold on here. I mean, at this point his front line is actually losing anyway. It's in better shape than the defensive position on the other side, but the attackers now sending forward some Mountain Orc Berserkers to try and seal the deal. A bit of an extra AP to make sure that Umbar There's no way back for them. I mean, they're still alive, the Harbingers of Castamere. They must have a monstrous kill count at this point. Balakith marks, and they're trying to... I think they are... Yeah, Corsair Crossman here. So what WK I think he's going to try and do is maybe hold on to this choke point over here. Maybe buy as much time as possible for these crossbow Corsairs to rack up a decent kill count. I think maybe he... If I had one criticism of how he's played, he's probably waited too long to commit the crossbow Corsairs to firing. Because at this point, he's not going to be able to use all his ammo before they're inevitably intercepted in melee. Battered Balakith Marksman, Harbingers of Castamere, and Corsair Blackguards are not going to be enough to hold this horde at bay for too much longer. I mean, yes, you can see that these locked morale units are continuing to do their thing, but not going to last for too much longer now, are they? Angmar Marauders here. Mountain Orc Berserkers doing their thing. And support coming over from Inarius, and of course Inarius and Engsvitz both know, before moving on to the settlement itself at the back of the mountains, they first and foremost need to deal with the units that are still behind them, secure the ground they've already taken for themselves, and then as one big mass the Orcs can move forward. There goes Umbar's general at the hands, I think that was one of the Orc fellas that got him, running his axe down his back. Of course, what are they actually firing at? Are they firing at the ranks way over there? I mean, they need to do something, and quick, because I mean the attackers know they're here, so they need to set up into a position where they can actually do something. I mean, it's only a matter of time before these trolls intercept them in melee, and that would be my one and only criticism of WK, as I've said, because I think he's handled his position again very well. Yeah, they're done, of course, their crossbows. One or two more volleys at the most, I think, is the best they can expect, and they need to take them here, because I do think the defenders will need these kills. There's still so many Orcs left to try and get through. Undoubtedly, the units that are defending the settlement at the back will be very elite. The defensive position is very good, but time and time again we've seen quantity overrule quality in this kind of siege battle. Will it be the case here? One troll of Gundabad left. That big spiked club. Yeah, now the trolls are in and amongst them. So that is going to be that pretty much. What have we got here? Seafarers moving backwards. So yeah, of course, this defensive position up here. In effect, the natural battlements that the defenders have been making use of. The only way to get onto them is to go around. So it's going to be interesting, this, isn't it? I mean, having a look at the percentage of kills, the attackers have lost 3% less, which in this sort of situation is always a good sign for the attackers as we hit into what is effectively the halfway point of the battle. I know that frames-wise we've still got a long way to go, but the first phase of the battle has been dealt with, and then the final phase in the settlement at the back will get underway. The snow trolls getting in here as well, overwhelming force being brought down upon these Corsair crossbowmen. Losses really racking up at this point. Trolls of Angmar, victory seems certain. It's overwhelming numbers, isn't it? Around on infantry as well. And yeah, I have to say that Inarius and Engsvitz have played this very well. Based on the... I suppose the other attackers were bound by the rules to a certain extent as well. But even so, the attackers have taken the outer section of the mountain range at this point. I do wonder if Gondor have got anything hidden over here. Because if they do, they could bring them out for the late game. Maybe something like the Mithrandir's retinue. And that is it. So the attackers have secured themselves pretty much. There's still a couple of locked morale units fighting to the bitter end in here. Corsair Blackguard surrounded by Moranons. And yeah, they're just killing the Corsair crossbows as they move through. So a quick look at this defensive position. Marksmen of Caerandros, of course, up on the sides. Archers absolutely going to be in brutal positions here. Fully upgraded veterans. A lot of the Gondorian archers, of course, are very good as infantry as well. Numenorian steel bows can certainly fit into that category as well. It's going to be tough on the approach here. There's a trebuchet as well. I mean, this is going to be it. I mean, It's going to be a brutal advance through these narrow valleys for the attackers. It's just a question of whether or not the defenders have got enough left in the tank to withstand the onslaught that's about to hit them. I would say that probably over here is a little bit more of a likely spot to break through. Yes, it's a very narrow choke point over here, but the support for the defenders, I should say, is more in reach for the attackers to try and counteract with their own supporting units. We shall see. Belagire archers here. There's another trebuchet as well. I mean, trebuchets don't have a lot of ammunition, but they don't necessarily need a lot of ammunition in this situation. And of course, as we look through, I mean, time and time again, we're seeing quality units. Shield Guard, AP, Pharism Swordmasters, absolutely brutal, Numenorian cohorts. A lot of the Gondorian units, even the archers, are going to be tough to kill in melee. Fully upgraded Axemen of Lasarnak with their AP, Citadel Guardsmen, Vanguard. I mean, it is mostly Gondor and Numenor. I think, you know, Umbar for the most part. Most of their strength was spent on the front line, but a big kill count I'm sure WK was able to rack up. I think I will make a little bit of a cut here actually, because it's probably going to take the attackers a little while to sort of organise their armies in this section of the mountain range as well before they do start to move in. I doubt they're going to sort of charge unthinkingly in one unit at a time after all. So I will make a little bit of a cut here and we'll rejoin when the final phase gets underway. Well, once again, here we go, and we may as well rejoin now because the Numenorians are going to start opening up on the attackers as they start to get into position, and unsurprisingly, I do think they are going to prioritise this angle. Trebuchets have been firing in the interim that I've been cut, but not a huge amount of losses have been accrued, and actually this is a good thing for the attackers as well, because it's a sign the trebuchets are being used a little bit too recklessly. Their ammo is a little bit too important to just be used in that sense. You need to get them into a choke point and firing in there, I think, with flaming shot to have the biggest impact in this sort of situation. Getting a few grazing hits on individual units is not going to cut the mustard here if you are the defenders. Numenorian steel bows are firing, but again, not all that effectively. They are hitting at the very least, and they will do a decent amount of damage there to the Witch Realm Scourge Raiders, but again, I feel as though the defenders are not really using their ammunition as wisely as they could, which could end up being the difference between victory and defeat in this sort of situation, to be honest with you. But we shall see, won't we? Witch Realm Pikemen are here. And around on infantry as well. Pikes are going to be important in this situation, I think, for the attackers, because, I mean, if they don't, they're going to be marching into the teeth of something like the Nairon Aru Sentinels, and ugh. I mean, that's going to be difficult to break down regardless. I mean, that's a huge amount of quality there with the Royal Legion in there as well. Shield Guard with their shield wall, and of course the fact they have AP as well for spears. Absolutely brutal. I mean, this is going to be Numenor at their scariest when you have them all this quality. Seafarers of Nindam also here. Also with their new shields, which I actually prefer as well. I think those shields are a little bit nicer. The design on them. But it's just a question of numbers here. I mean, the attackers still have a lot of their numbers intact. They still have a lot of very useful tools at their disposal, including trolls, supporting units like drummers. They still have some ammunition at range. If they had to filter in and they had none of those tools, I would fancy the defenders, honestly. Again, another volley from the trebuchet, one of the projectiles hitting the cliff, the other one only managing to kill off 2 Angmar marauders. Not all that impressive. This, however, is one of the main tools that the defenders can call upon at this stage. Rangers. The Dunaim shadow bows, they're going to be in there, firing into those blobs. And as long as they can keep that up, as long as they don't bury too much of their ammunition into the dirt right in front of them, which can happen when archers are put into a position like this, they're going to be able to do a ton of damage. Again, grazing hits from that trebuchet at best. Not really all that impressive. Again, new player 195's Angmar army going to be leading the way with FFA Muffin's Misty Mountains army following him in. It's going to be more Gondor over on this side than Numenor, I would say. The trebuchet is there. He needs to be real careful, Chris Almighty, otherwise that trebuchet is going to go falling off the cliff like most medieval 2 siege can do. That's the risk you take when you put your artillery into a position like that. I'd be shocked if it doesn't happen, to be honest with you. His archers don't actually have the best firing position here, to be honest with you. Like, the actual topography of the land itself is getting in the way a bit. What have we got here? Goblin Band going to be leading the way, of course, against Nimlothian Honor Guard and Fountain Guard. Another front line with this composition. Not going to be all that effective, of course. How long can Gondor hold, though? Warns of the White Tower and Vanguard of King Elazar also in support. Citadel Guard, AP. They've got everything they need, Gondor, in quality terms. And also, to be honest with you, it looks as though the attackers are prioritising Numenor. So Gondor will probably feel fairly comfortable in their situation as it stands at the moment. Numenor, on the other hand, maybe sweating a little bit. Ooh, there are the Witches. That is a bit of a game changer, to be honest with you. Engsvit's using his Witches to brutal effect. Honestly, as well, I'm shocked they were able to get that close. Look at all the archers that Numenor has at their disposal, including rangers. Like, those Witches should never have been allowed to get that close to the front line, because that front line there, with how densely packed it was a beacon for the Witches. And now, of course, the Witches are going to get shot. A ton of arrows coming in now. But that is already... I mean, you can see, actually, that the front line is actually still intact, which is something for Numenor. It wasn't actually as devastating as it first looked. Maybe the Witches have been... Have the Witches been toned down a little bit? I can't remember Kuro telling me about that, to be honest with you. Maybe they have, because I feel like the Witches of old would have destroyed that front line. But regardless, good damage nonetheless from the Witches. And that, of course, has kicked off the assault in earnest over on this side of the battlefield. Trolls doing their thing. It's a lot of archers in support, however. Belagair archers firing away. Numenor and steel bows need to get into a slightly better position. I would say the trebuchet now would be the time for that. Seafarers of Nindamos as well. Ready and waiting. Just the organisation of the defenders so far, I think, has been slightly questionable. The fact that some of these units are just not quite in position. Are they on fire at will? I think they might be. No, they're firing their javelins up into the air. I think that, to be fair, I think Horton has spent quite a lot of time away from the game at this point. But positioning of the skirmishers here has been quite poor, I would say, from Horton in this battle. His archers and his javelins have been firing up in the air like that a lot, and that makes them much more ineffective than they would otherwise be. And that has been a real boon for the attackers thus far, you would have to say. Blackwatch Legion bulldozing their way through this front line, Royal Legion of Armenelos. Again, it comes down to the fact that, yes, there's a lot of quality on the front line from the defenders, but the attackers, they're just concentrating their force in bursts, and it's having the desired effect so far, you have to say. Numenorian cohort are going to try and come in again to try and patch things up, but again, it's sort of after the fact, like slapping a band-aid on, rather than taking preventative measures in the first place for the defenders, and I feel as though that may end up costing them quite dearly. Over here, meanwhile, sort of a bit of a tense situation over here. I mean, these goblins are probably not feeling all that confident about this situation, considering what's in front of them. A very, very scary looking array of Fountain Guard, shielded and unshielded. Goblin band are here. And they're not going to do much of anything, really, let's be honest. Gondor are going to be able to hold for some time on this side of things for the time being. Numenor, on the other hand, is much more in question. The Numenorian cohort has temporarily managed to patch things up on this front line. The Blackwatch Legion is still here, but they're sort of running around behind enemy lines like headless chickens. Some damage was done, and again you can see the jagged front line. The attackers can take advantage of that with a bit more infantry on the front line, I think. And the Blackguard of Barad-dûr are trying to do just that. Numenor holding on for the time being. If they can withstand this mass push, maybe that will make up for things somewhat. Blackwatch Legion getting into the rear of these pikemen, trying to take away the advantage of their formation. But I have to say, once again, Inarius and Engsvit have played this battle so far to perfection, I would say. And the defenders they've been faced with, to be brutally honest, have not. Skirmisher positioning, front lines that were too undermanned, that sort of thing. All the sort of things which have cost defenders battle after battle in this game. And so I feel fairly comfortable in my assessment at the moment. I think the attacks are probably going to win this. Unless the defenders have simply got so much quality hidden in the settlements at the back that they can outlast this sort of thing. But that is a big if. And the Blackguard are coming forward, taking a ton of losses, to be fair, as they do so, but they won't mind, because another really nice choke point is going to be lost to the defenders. The Seafarers are going to try and get into position once again. There's going to be another choke point here at the back. Ooh, fences. I hope and pray that the battle doesn't crash in the latter stages. A 64k frame battle, because that would snap my heart in two. Numenorian cohort are here, trying their best to hold the line, but again it's just too little resistance being put up to huge assaults from the attackers. Yes, the attackers, this sort of thing will cost the attackers. Like, they are taking losses all the while they do this, but the attackers, like, when it's 5 Orc armies, they can afford to take losses like this. The defenders can't. To be fair, I mean, you know, not much in the way of reinforcements left over here, but up here, where the lower quality armies were, they're going to start pressuring Gondor as well. They do still have quite a lot of reinforcements, whether it's of the quality that's necessary to bust through a position like this. I was wondering where these guys went. I did see them earlier on in the fight. WK is going to be padding his kill count even more with the Casimir's Rangers in a position like this. Going to try and do some damage, but the Heavy Goblin Crossbowmen counteracting them, so good move that from Muffins. It's going to force those Casimir's Rangers back, and of course allow the infantry fight to progress as it will. Although if the infantry fight does progress as it will, Gondor will be quite comfortable at this point in time, with Fountain Guard and Lothian Honor Guard on the front line. Mountain Orc Berserkers, even with their AP, are not likely to change that all that much, if we're being honest. Back over here, Axeman of Lasarnak. Yeah, there's not enough, I don't think, at the back end of this settlement to win. I mean, Gondor still have a lot left. But a lot of it is skirmishes, and as good as Gondor skirmishes can be in melee, the higher end ones in particular. Just look at this, look at the brute force that's being displayed here. And again, Numenor's ill-prepared defence being knocked clean out of the way. That's a lot of orcs. Still trolls alive as well. The troll drummers have been very important in this battle as well, because this sort of thing can affect the orcs adversely in morale terms. But with the troll drummers right there, it hasn't been the case. Blackwatch Legion, 3 of them, victory seems certain. I don't think so. The Rangers are more than capable of looking after themselves in melee, and they need to get these guys out of melee with them, because they need to start shooting, because there's a blob available for them to shoot at. Sauron's Will moving forward. The Orcs continuing to push in. Witcher-Elm Pikemen preventing the Belagair archers from firing again. They had a better position than the other archers at the very least, but it's kind of the last archer you'd want to have the prime position. When you've got armour-piercing archers and body-piercing archers and trebuchets, you don't really want the Belagair archers to be hogging the best position to be firing into. The trebuchet getting off one final shot, getting a hit at least. But that will be the last that they do, I think. Angmar Marauders, I mean, the trebuchet crew will hold their own for a little while against Angmar Marauders at the very least, but yeah. More are going to be on the way up here, scarier things than Angmar Marauders, and that will be the end of this artillery piece for the defenders. Unfortunately for them. Still the trolls move forward, and again, this is what I'm talking about bursts of the assault. They've come in with their great shields, they've backed that up with trolls, they've come in with infantry as well. Exactly the sort of thing you need to do when you're playing like a full-blooded orc attacking army like this. They've supported right as well with their ranged units. Like Morannon archers are never going to be world beaters by any means, but they have still been useful in their role as support. And I do think the attackers deserve to go on to win this battle, if I'm being honest. Sauron's Will. Scourge Raiders are there. The Troll Drummers in support. This front line being pressurised already, but it's by Orc fodder, so they will fall away, most certainly. Over on this side of things, meanwhile, Gondor looking a little bit more dominant over here. It's a pretty scary force they're faced with. Mountain at coast, a lot of numbers here, but the quality of these Gondorian units here is certainly coming home to roost. The Mountain at coast are going to really struggle against the AP that both Fountain Guard variants can lay down. And of course Gondor still have reinforcements. Reinforcements close enough as well that they could be committed quickly. Citadel Guard, Axeman of Lasarnak, and there are of course these units up here as well. Wardens of the White Tower, Vanguard of King Elisar as well. So Gondor looking a little bit better for them over on this side of things, with 20k frames left on the clock. Farazim Saltmass coming. I think Horton, he knows which way the battle is going here, so he's heading over here. He's going to try and help out Gondor, make their victory a little bit more significant perhaps, and he's going to leave a rear guard over here. Once again, though, you can see the Witchers have come forward yet again, and at this point Numenor probably doesn't have the ranged units to actually counteract the Witchers. I say again though, like Horton really should have had those Witchers killed earlier on in the fight. The Seafarers are going to do their best in melee, but the Pikes are not in close proximity with them. Now the one unit of attacking Rangers is also in a good position, so the bullying of Numenor continues really, as the Orcs continue their forward momentum. Blackguard of Barad-dûr and Trolls coming up the hill to finish off Horton's Rangers as well. The Snow Trolls are still in remarkable condition, really. They've only been committed when the attackers were really on the up, to be fair. But to have a unit of fresh Trolls for the late game. Temple Guard is still here. Like, that's the scary thing as well. Like, Mordor's scariest units I don't think have been committed yet. Angmar's have. The Blackguard were very depleted when we saw them earlier. The Witches have blown their load, as it were, at this point. But Uruk captains, Temple units, other than the Trolls, Mordor have rationed their quality very nicely. And here we can see the Orc fellas pushing through the gap once again. Yeah, I mean, it's fair to say Horton's quite rusty with the game at this point, because he has borne the full brunt of the fury from Mordor and Angmar here, and his Numenor army, regardless of the quality that it may have, has not been sufficient. And there you can see a rout from the Numenorian Shield Guard. That's a rarity indeed. However, it's interesting over here. I think you can tell that this is sort of intended to be the final stand, because you can see here, this is a position that defending archers can usually take up, but now the attackers are going to be able to take it. The primary point of the settlement has been lost. There is a unit of Numenorian cohort, again, a front line which is far too thin on the ground to withstand for any length of time against that Orc assault. Castamir's Rangers were thinking about coming over, I think, but now it's time to rethink from a defending point of view, and I think actually over here is the best place to defend. Gondor is still doing very well on that front line, as you would expect, but also up here in the hills, abandon the settlement temporarily to maybe try and take it back when the Orcs have all been killed. I think that would be the best way for the defenders to try and go about their business at this point in time. Victory seems certain for Gondor on the front line, still doing the business. Marksman of Caer-Andros chipping in with some kills as well. Another unit of Royal Legion of Armenelos are here. Those marksmen try and rack up a good kill count for themselves, supporting the Fountain Guard on the front line, which is still holding firm. Let's see what's going on over here. Still a few Numenorian units in there, fighting till the bitter end, but the momentum that Mordor and Angmar's northern armies have seized since the early stages of their engagements has just not gone away this entire fight. And you can see the pathway they've taken in the minimap here. It's gone from sort of down through here, through there, up here, and then the intent will be, of course, right up here to where the defenders will be laying on their final stand. So they will have covered a large portion of the map, to be fair to them. What a battle it's been. So yeah, the entirety of the settlement at this point will be abandoned. This Numenorian cohort's not going to be able to get away as well. Horton again, he's left it too late. It's poor, I've got to be honest. He's just been too indecisive, and his positioning's been all off. And the Snow Trolls are so quick, they're going to be able to catch up with the Numenorian cohort. He's going to need to continue to force path them away. Because, I mean, a single unit of Numenorian cohort could be the difference between victory and defeat here, so he does need to save as much as he possibly can. The problem is, I think they need to hold this choke point here, to be honest. I mean, this fight here has been so profitable for them at this point, the defenders, that they can't afford to just allow Mordor and Angmar to recharge it. And the Fountain Guard's still in the ascendancy here, still doing the business, still with a bit of support from arrows in behind, trying to push their way through here. One lone mountaineer at coast has managed to get through, but he's wondering, well, what now? What do I do with myself now that I've managed to cycle through? He's got one buddy to come and join him as well. The Cave Trolls are not going to be ideal against Fountain Guard and Lothian Honor Guard, but a few Orcs are starting to break through. Could this be the beginning of the end of that Fountain Guard front line? Here are the Numenorian cohort. The Snow Trolls are in there. A rear charge from the Snow Trolls, and you can see here they're going to try and save a unit of Fountain Guard and probably succeed with one unit, leave the other one as a rear guard. And they are now. They're going to hold the mountains. I mean, they're doing what I would have suggested in this situation, considering the fate that has befallen them, trying to hold on to their settlement. I'm not sure whether it's going to be enough, though. This is almost like, this is pretty much the last phase. The settlement was phase 2. Outer Reaches was phase 1. Now we're here in phase 3, the third and final phase. Marksman of Caer-Andros still firing in, trying to get every little bit of damage they can. And again, like, this is not the organisation you want. The Numenorian cohort weren't able to get up before the Snow Trolls did catch up to them. You would honestly back the Numenorian cohort against the Snow Trolls, but it's just the fact the Snow Trolls are getting in the way of this defensive line being organised quickly enough. That is the main issue here. Intimidating sight up there though, Casimir's Rangers, WK. Still with his part to play. Goblin Halberds. Goblin King Bodyguard moving forward. There's a lot of mountaineer at coast as well, so all of the quality that the Misty Mountains have is now going to be able to be dumped into this assault. Not that that was all that much, but still. It's there nonetheless, and again, it's hard to be complimentary here because, like, again, Horton's organisational skills have not been on point here in this final defence. The Numenorian Steel Bowmen are going to suffer the same fate as most of the rest of his army in that they're just going to be overran and overwhelmed. Orc Maulers are going to be able to get in behind them, use that AP damage on them while the Mountaineer at Coast hold them from the front. And that's going to be the end of yet another potentially important infantry unit. Because the Steel Bows can be really useful in melee in this sort of situation, especially when you see the slew of orcs that's still advancing down the canyon. It's going to be tough. It's going to be very tough for them. However, I saw the Blackbacks. Or was that Black Urks? I think that was Black Urks actually. Another front line for Gondor. Snow Trolls getting through. Not sure why though. Like the Snow Trolls, they didn't need to be committed there, I don't think. Maybe he's just lost control of them because they're kind of all over the place. But of course, against Fountain Guard and Citadel Guard, Snow Trolls are going to be killed off very, very quickly. Gondor laying on a front line at this point, and this is going to be pretty key. I mean, the Trebuchet is still here. Still a lot of good tools that they have at their disposal, to be fair. Do they have Athelian Rangers still? I wonder. No hidden units down there by the looks of things. Pharazim Swordmaster is still there. Axemen from Silent. I just don't think they've got enough. I think considering the numbers of orcs that are here, the Rangers and the Trebuchet are going to have to do so much of the heavy lifting here. It's going to be very hard, especially if the organisational skills continue to be on this level. The attackers should go on to win this. They will take heavy losses, I've no doubt, but they should go on to win this. Lost half their men indeed. More volleys coming in. Orc fellas back there. White Uruk fearmongers marching their way forth. Victory seems certain. Only a fool could lose this battle. Which surprises me considering they just charged into the front of Fountain Guard and warns of the White Tower. But there you go. Citadel Guard are going to move backwards. Guardians of Khandu moving forward with their armour upgrades as well. Castamir's Rangers at this point are going to start opening up, and this is where they'll get to pad their kill count out even more than they already have. Veterans of Osgiliath going to chip in with a bit of damage as well. More of a defensive archer, of course, crossed with being a line infantry hybrid. But still, any damage that they can do at this point is going to be sorely needed. Trebuchet is here as well. It is going to be damaging, but again, I think the attackers are capable of withstanding this pressure. Look at how the frame rate doesn't drop. I still don't trust it enough to zoom right in on it on a battle of this size, because I'd really hate to have to come back to this position again in the battle if it did crash. So standard Gondor archers with the armour upgrades look like they still have some ammo as well. Ooh, Casimir's Rangers, are they out of ammunition? They've pulled out their blades, so it does look like it, which may be the difference here. Able to get a few very decent volleys off, but I'm not sure whether that's going to be enough. And again, the layers that the defenders have used, they've been too weak. They haven't had enough men on the front of each one of them, and it's allowed the attackers the advantage. I'll say it, I've said it probably 1,000 times before. A layered defence, if you do it like this, is not going to work. The Trebuchet is going to come in. If the defenders do win this, it will be on the back of their quality and the good position of their ranged units here at the end. It will not be because I think they deserve the win. Because I think the attackers have played this far better than the defenders. I think WK would be the exception there, but I think both Gondor and Numenor have both been guilty of this sort of thing. Numenor especially, but Gondor also. More reinforcements coming in. And pretty much the entirety of the Orc army is here now. There's still a significant amount of troops, including some decent ones. Goblin King Bodyguard are in there, or captains. There's still the quality from Mordor, of course. Still some Great Shield units, actually. Depleted, so they'll have to wait their time, but they could still very easily have a big impact on this battle. Castlemir's Rangers probably going to be committed to the front line at this point, but I think this Gondorian front line is only going to last so much longer before it does inevitably fall away. What have we got here? It says victory is a distinct possibility, but with the attackers continuing to push forwards, I kind of find that difficult to believe. Having a look at the percentage of kills now, yes, a 10% differential in favour of the attackers. So still close. It's still not impossible for the defenders to come back, considering the quality units they still have, but considering the way they've decided to set their stall out so far, I find it unlikely. And the announcer seems to agree with me. Castlemir's Rangers actually in a good position to intercept these Mountain Orc Berserkers that are trying to filter behind enemy lines. Rangers can look after themselves in melee. They're not world beaters by any means, but their melee defense is decent enough. And you can see here again, like, Wards of the White Tower, they're trying to pull back. They'll probably successfully pull back as well. But I mean, it's time to pick a position and just go all in on it, I think, for the defenders. That is really the only thing that's left to them at this point. That was a nice hit. The Trebuchet getting a good hit. They're going to need more of that. The defenders. Veterans Oscillator there. The Trebuchet still firing away. Watcher and Pikemen moving forward. The Castlemir's Rangers being used as the rear guard to try and allow the Trebuchet to continue to get shots like that, which they're sorely going to need. They're going to need to rout some of these units with those Trebuchet shots as well, I think. Look at this. It was inevitable, really, wasn't it? They're still able to fire it, though, I think. He needs to hurry, though, really. Oh, it's going to fall. It's going down the hill. There it goes. It's all over for them. Chris Almighty needs to stop fiddling around with the positioning at this point and just fire, otherwise he's in danger of making his Trebuchet useless. Amusingly enough, that still can fire. It's probably a better position than the one up here as well, really. But, I mean, it's pretty wild. This is the world we live in. Foul sorcery from Gondor. Another good hit. And that does cause the Orc fellas to rout. They're going to need, again, like I said, much more of that if they are to have any chance of winning this battle, the defenders. And it's not beyond the realms of possibility. He did use some of his ammunition earlier on rather wastefully, I think, Chris Almighty and his Trebuchet in that period where I cut the battle. But he should still have enough to deal a decent blow. And then they're going to have to hope that the quality they still have left is enough after that. I don't know if it will be, though, because the attackers still have some quality as well. Especially from Mordor's army, and again, like, what is this? What is he doing? He's going to try and counter-attack with his Vanguard and his Pharazim Swordmass as two really strong units. If he's going to do this, though, I think he should do this with more units than just that. Close range hit there by the Treb. Another good hit, causing a lot of units to waver. Still just 10% the differential, though. I mean, this is the problem. Every man the defenders lose at this point is worth, like, 10 from the Orcs. That is a rout, though. A good rout. And percentage of kills doesn't really take routing into account, so maybe that's the way for the defenders to actually go on to win this fight. Time will tell. Vanguard of King Elisar trying to get into position. I mean, they may as well. Like, they need to keep firing with this Trebuchet. Ooh, there go the Witchers, though. Still with ammunition. Still making a nuisance of themselves. I do think they are actually a little bit weaker than they once were. Still, though, a good amount of the Vanguard of King Elisar falling by the wayside there. Good looking unit, the Vanguard of King Elisar. The fine Gondorian armour that they wear, as are the Pharazim Swordmass, of course. Two brutal units that are going to really extract their toll from the attackers here. The Trebuchet, though, it needs to fire once again. It looks like it's going to. I mean, it's got a perfect shot there into the middle once again. Come on, you know you can do it. You need to stop making little adjustments here and just fire. This is it. It's all or nothing for Gondor. They've got a lot of quality in melee, but they need the Trebuchet to make a huge dent in the attacking army, otherwise they will inevitably end up just being overwhelmed. There we go. Centre mass of the Orcs, more kills. There's a troll on the front line, which is not going to last very long against all these heavy swordsmen. Wards of the White Tower did come back in, and then for some reason Chris Almighty is pulling him back out again. Like, this is it. You may as well just commit everything into this. Gondor archers firing away. I think they have a decent shot. Again, like, this could be a case of positioning once again. I still don't understand why they're not over here, to be honest with you. I mean, they have a shot at least. They're able to hit something, which is better than nothing. Ooh, that could be unfortunate. That was a miss from the trebuchet. A terrible miss. They need to hit centre mass here. Keep getting the kills. Another unit of archers getting into position. Marksman of Caer Andros. This is what it's going to come down to. They need to make a dent in these units as best they can. Marksman of Caer Andros, of course, useful in melee as well, so once they're out of ammunition, they'll need to take up their swords and do their part. Still Citadel Guard over here as well. Veterans of Osgiliath pulling out their blades, ready. Royal Legion. It is a good amount of quality, this. Oof. And there goes an attacking general. The sort of blow which can be very decisive moving forward. Will this be enough? The attacks have played so well up to this point. I do think they deserve the win, like I said. But this trebuchet could be enough to tear it away from them. It all depends really on how much ammunition it has left. 2 or 3 more significant shots could be enough to bring this battle into question, especially with all the routing that it can induce. Marksmen of Caer Andros pulling out their blades, so only a couple of volleys they had left in them before they're now going to be committed forward. Royal Legion going to start to be committed forward as well. Where the bloody hell have the Wardens of the White Tower gone? They in there? Yes, they are. I was going to say. Good. No sense in pulling them back. I mean, like I said, this may as well be it. This is your best defensive position anyway. This is all or nothing for them. Black Uruks of the Mountains, only 68 of them being committed. They must have routed off from a trebuchet shot. But here they come. Gondor archers now getting into a much better position. How much ammunition do they still have left? Of course, not the most damaging archer in the world, but again, like I said, every little helps for this situation. They're going to need all the support they can muster. Everyone is going to need to do their bit here for the defenders if they're going to turn this battle around. Royal Legion of Armenelos are there. Defeat seems certain. Does the trebuchet fire again? Even just one shot here might be the difference between victory and defeat. Are they going to? I mean, it looks ridiculous. This trebuchet on the cliffside. Ranon archers in the background. They still have some supporting units after all the attackers here. Minarius. Still some healthy Guardians of Kharn back here. Goblin King Bodyguard, Orc Fellas. Still stuff back here after all. Blackguard, Temple Executioners and Guard. Guardians of Kharn. Like, this is the problem. Like, they still have a lot in reserve. Yes, there's a lot of quality here from the defenders, but like I said, I do think they left themselves a hole. They dug themselves a hole too deep to escape from, I think. And as much as they're going to be able to make the attackers really bleed for this, I'm just not convinced it's going to be enough. And what are these Gondorian archers actually firing at now? I hope they're not going after the Moranon archers. Moranon archers are not all that important at this point. Now another glut of orcs moving forward to join the attack. Hammerguard are there as well. Okay, Veterans of Osgiliath are now also being committed to the fight. I'm going to zoom in, going to take my life into my hands. Hopefully the trebuchet doesn't kill so many in one go it causes the game to crash. Oh, hello. Trebuchet is shooting back there and missing. That's a tragedy. Still, veterans now on the front line, very accomplished melee fighters after all. But again, I think it's going to take just a little bit more than that for the defenders to go on to win, as I've said countless times already at this point. I think it's just a case of the defenders just needing to commit everything forward, trying to break the attackers' will to fight, force the lower tier units to rout off. Wardens, Royal Legion fighting. Like, real warriors on this front line, and they will be racking up one hell of a kill count for themselves. The Pharazim Swordmass as well, with 3 hit points. This is exactly the sort of fight where they're going to be absolute monsters. Butts. Butts. Too many attackers. More orc fellas coming forward, 180 armor-piercing orcs. Low tier, but again, it's just more damage bit by bit. I do think the defenders are going to fall away here. I mean, unless it's a mass rout. I mean, you can see they're depleting around on halberds running away. That, I think, is the way the defenders can win this, because of course they still need to deal with the quality units from Mordor and to a lesser extent Angmar and the Misty Mountains. I think the trebuchets are out of ammunition now, so the crew and the archers are out of ammo, so yeah, no more supporting units. It's just pure melee from now for the defenders. But like I said, they need a mass rout really, because they still need to deal with the quality units. If they're having to deal with the quality units of the attackers with all of the sort of fodder support that is around them, it's never really going to go their way, even with the amount of quality that Numenor can bring to a melee fight, the balance that Gondor are bringing to it at the moment. It just ain't going to happen. Goblin King's bodyguard are in there. Olag Kai moving forwards. Going to try and crack their way through here. Only 6 of them, of course, because they've seen combat in this battle quite a lot already. But still, just this extra damage that they're going to be dealing. It's going to be pretty brutal. Citadel Guard. Let's see, I mean, yeah, there's really not much else I can say about this. I mean, slowly but surely, I think as brave as this final stand is going to be, I think the Orcs are going to be victorious over the Numenorians on this occasion. And I think it could have been different. I think if organisationally, I think if Gondor and especially Numenor had been a little bit more on point, I think this fight could very easily have gone the other way. Put it this way, I think if they had been on the same level that Umbar had been on in the early stages of the fight with how they were organising their lines on a micro sense, then I think the defenders would have won this battle. As it was, I think Numenor especially was a little bit lacking in that regard. I think Gondor, to be fair, considering the situation, Gondor, there wasn't much else Gondor could have done differently. I think the middle section of the battle, maybe they dropped the ball a little bit, but other than that, I don't think Gondor did that much wrong. Numenor, on the other hand, most certainly did. Olag Kai, of course, dying very quickly in the middle of all of this elite infantry, but they have managed to cause enough disruption. Guardians of Khan Doom pushing forwards. Progress is being made. Marksmen of Kaer Andros are going to try and add their mass to the front line. One thing I would say about Gondor is he has been indecisive in this way. Definitely he's been like that, and I don't like to see that. Like, I don't really see the point in that. Like, there's no point in saving these units anymore. You may as well commit everything to this front line, because as soon as you lose the elites that are on this front line, it's hardly like one unit of Citadel Guard is going to be enough to keep all of these men in line. Like, Gondor archers in melee, if that's your ace in the hole, like, what's the point? And that, I would say, is poor from Gondor. Very poor. But at this point, the battle is already beyond them anyway, so I suppose it doesn't matter too much. Drummers have been really good in this battle. Like, they've been, I think, the unsung heroes. Like, they've just been there in the background, making sure that the Orcs keep fighting for just that little bit longer. And again, it's the things you don't see so much that can be really important in this kind of thing. Like, ranged units are kind of hard to keep track of as well. Stuff like heavy goblin crossbows. They won't have been getting huge amounts of kills, but they will definitely have been contributing. Very, very important. Again, watch from Hammer Guard moving forward. Like, you know when units like that are still there, available, that you're going to be in trouble. Trebuchet crew. Still just sort of manoeuvring their way around. I think it's time actually we move up to ×2 speed. There's no need to keep the charade going for too much longer, because we know, of course, that the attackers are going to slowly but surely eat the defenders. I suppose the Orcs would eat the Fallen as well after the battle, which is a rather grisly thought, isn't it? Numenorians as well. Bigger than normal humans, so plenty to go round. Citadel Guardsmen going to move backwards. Axemen of Lasarnak are going to charge in. Well, defeat is a distinct possibility. You don't say. It has been a brave effort here at the end, though. I think Gondor, like with their trebuchet, obviously doing a lot of the heavy lifting. WK, I mean, his rangers didn't have much ammunition left, to be honest with you. It could have been a different battle as well if someone with rangers had still been there. I didn't see any Athelian rangers actually in this battle at all, which would have been a big difference maker for Gondor. Obviously, Numenor misused their rangers a little bit as well, much in the same way as they misused quite a lot of their ranged units, to be honest with you. Which, of course, is always a bit of a kiss of death when you're the defenders and you need to be able to thin out the enemy ranks somehow. The drummers moving forward again. But I do think the attackers deserve to win. I think Inarius and Exwitz in particular played almost the perfect attacking battle in this situation. They've done everything they needed to. They've exploited their opponent's mistakes. Organisationally, they've been top-notch. The other attackers, I think they were bound a little bit more by rules, but even they did their job. I mean, yes, WK did a number on their initial waves, but they were always just there for their numbers, as the Misty Mountains often are. Lower quality armies, certainly. But they filled that role well enough, and I think the attackers as a whole have definitely been very good value for the inevitable win here. The trebuchet, amusingly enough, still has ammunition, which I'm shocked they weren't using that sooner. Again, another questionable decision. Still, more damage done. The orcs have been made to work for this. Finally getting rid of the Gondorians hidden in these hills. And the Baromir Canyon falls into enemy hands. More and more orcs just pouring forwards. Gondor archers joining the fray. They may have full armour upgrades, but they will find themselves hideously outgunned in this melee fight. Maybe if things were a little bit closer, they could be the sort of thing which tilt the balance of power, but not on this occasion, I fear. And the march forward continues. And that's the thing, I mean, to be fair, here in the late game, the forward momentum of the orcs was stopped to a large extent, or at least slowed down a lot, but the momentum ever since the victory in the north has always been with the orcs, I would suggest. But a good battle, and to be fair as well, it's really good to see Horton's scenarios back. Because they're always big, large-scale stuff. New maps are always made for them as well, and new maps are something I really enjoy covering, because of course doing the same maps over and over can get a bit stale. Because generally speaking, when you've seen a map 3 or 4 times, you kind of get a feel for how they often work out. Unless it's a map like Tol Falas, where it's very varied and you can sort of see different things. But even with that one, I've started to see the patterns that will always break out, to be honest with you. Victory for them over there, the Trebuchet crew now being hunted down. And this is going to be the end. Gondorian Spearmen manning the Trebuchet. And that's going to be that. I'm also pleased with the reshader settings that I'm using now. I think I've finally got them to a position that I like. The only problem is I think in snowy battles it makes the snow a bit bright. But I think that's a price I'm willing to pay, to be honest with you. But there we go. Horton's return to scenario making, and it was a good one as well, I have to say. And that is the wrong percentage of kills, because the percentage of allies killed there was actually higher earlier on in the fight, so I just missed out on actually seeing the percentage of kills. I would imagine it's probably slightly higher than 10% difference. I would put it around anywhere from 85 to 90% to 100% is where I would put it. So from 10 to 15 would be my guess in this particular situation. I mean, you can see the amount of kills was extreme, to say the least. And actually, with the amount of orcs on display, this battle was buttery smooth. So the mechanical differences to the Rangers have been significant. And you will actually see, this does confirm my suspicions about Minas Morgul as well, because Minas Morgul will be the battle that comes out after this one. And there were technical difficulties in that one, which is why I don't want to show it first. And it did sort of bum me out a little bit. But I do feel sort of confident in the assessment that I gave Kuro now about the reasons for that. And it must be due to the architecture that was used. But yeah, very smooth this battle considering the huge amount of orcs that was on the defence. 6,000 kills for WK, of course. He did have a rather advantageous position with which to get those kills. But even so, he took advantage of that nonetheless. 4,800 for Gondor. Numenor lagging behind, and I do feel as though that was because Horton never really got his army set in a good position. If he did, then he would have gotten around the same sort of kills as Gondor, I think, and that would have been the difference between victory and defeat. So there it is. I mean, as far as the attackers go, it's easy to see who Inarius and Engsvitz were. Engsvitz getting 1,500 kills, Inarius getting 1,000, and then all of the fodder armies, of course, getting far fewer, but still performing their role as support very, very nicely. But let's see what did the damage for Inarius, because we saw the battle from his perspective, so Mordor. Olag Kai doing very well, so of course with every push, the trolls sort of followed that push in and dealt a lot of damage, so I think that's true of pretty much all the trolls, except the drummers, of course. 1 kill for the drummers, but the drummers were really one of the heroes of this battle, I think. Like, they didn't do anything in terms of kills, but as a supporting tool in this situation, they can make the orcs so much more difficult to deal with, because routing is one of the orcs' main concerns in this situation, as it was in the final stages, even with the troll drummers there, with the punishment they were taking. But throughout the battle, the drummers just kept the orcs pointing in the right direction for most of it. The rest of the army, pretty balanced overall. Minas Morgul, no, it's actually the Blackguard of Barad-dûr. That initial push, obviously, was what got the ball rolling for the attackers, and it never stopped rolling, unfortunately, for the defenders. Partially because the attackers were able to keep it rolling, but also because the defenders didn't really put on the kind of defence in places that was necessary to take full advantage of their positioning. But that's neither here nor there. A good victory for the attackers here. A good map as well, I have to say. I really like the sort of the mountain range aesthetic, and it's nice to have a new one of that, like a nice settlement hidden at the back. And overall, a very successful scenario, I think. And long may it continue. I want to get involved in some of these when Horton puts them on, if I possibly can. Although Battlelord is going to release within the next 24 hours, I want to say, which should give a hint on when this is recorded. I think that's the case anyway, ever since they sort of pushed forward the release date a little bit. It's madness, Bannerlord making the release date closer rather than further away. But regardless, of course, Reforged content will continue as is. And if it does, if schedule changes happen, I will of course let people know ahead of time, but considering the lockdown, I think that's less of a concern now than it otherwise would have been. So yeah, wild times indeed, but we've got some Horton scenarios now to get along with as well. Got other replays on the hotfix as well, the new version of the game, 0.97.1. So yeah, big thank you to Horton for sending this replay to me, and big thank you to him for also getting back involved in the scenario creating scene. Long may that continue. Big thank you to Inarius for sending me the replay. Big thanks to all the players for being a part of this very good battle. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you will join me for whatever is next.